Hello everyone and welcome back to Cloud Content. In this second episode I sat down with UnderTheMayo, an analytical gaming and film YouTuber who garnered a large level of support this year around his content relating to the game Doom Eternal. In this episode I asked him how he got started making YouTube videos, where his love for video games came from, and what he's most proud about with regards to his content and channel. If you have any questions relating to this episode, or would just like to get in contact with the podcast, you can email us at johnson.business.yt@gmail.com. With that housekeeping out the way, please sit back, relax and enjoy. Perfect, so I'm joined by UnderTheMayo today. Thank you so much for taking time out. First of all, my one question, and I know you've been asked it before, but just for my own listeners' sake, where did the name come from, UnderTheMayo?
Oh man, if I had $1 for every time I got asked. I guess because people see the name, they're like, "That's a strange name. Where did that come from?" I was working in a restaurant many years ago, and I mean, this is not a great story, but a friend of mine, we used to have a list of things we thought sounded like funny names for a band, like like words that went together that just kind of rolled off the tongue.
Yeah.
And so I was working at a restaurant and I took an order of a cheeseburger or something for table 33 or whatever. And then like 5 minutes later, that table said, "Hey, can I add something?" They wanted to add something like onions or something. So I went into the kitchen. I said, "Hey, table 33 wants to add onions to the burger. Can you do that?" And the cook said, "Where do you want me to put it on the burger?" And I locked up. I didn't know what to say because just put it on the burger, right? Like, I don't need to specify exactly where on the burger to put the onions. And so my brain just kind of froze, and I said, I don't know, just put it under the mayo, I guess. And just those words under the mayo just kind of flow off, like a name like Marilyn Manson, like the percussiveness, the flow of the movement of the mouth is just very smooth.
Yeah.
And so it's what I added it to the list of 30 band names that we had. And I didn't think about it again for years. And then in 2010, I think I started playing Black Ops just because I was bored and wasn't really hanging out with anyone. So I decided to play a multiplayer game. I got Black Ops and I needed an online name for my PS3 account. So I said, I'll go with UnderTheMayo, I guess. And then the rest is history, I guess.
What an odd question, though, because I worked in hospitality for 3 years, and I don't think I've ever been asked anything so bizarre by a chef in my life.
Right, like what would you say? You've got 6 tables, you got all this pressure on you, and then the cook asks you where to put something on a burger, and I didn't know what to say.
It could elicit some pretty, explicit response if you wanted to, but I doubt that's what you want to be saying to the cook.
I just went with the first thing that came to my mind. That is, put it under the mayo, I guess.
You kind of mentioned that you had like
stupid little story.
Yeah, but you mentioned you had like a list of like 30 names. Why did UnderTheMayo then stick out to you? Is there any particular reason, or is it just kind of this is the first one I see?
It was just the one that just kind of stayed in my head the longest because eventually I didn't have that list anymore. And I remembered a few names and that was just the one that kind of popped in my head. And I was like, okay, I'll go with that. Real reason.
Do you ever worry like a little bit, like maybe you don't, but like say if you one day, like you've obviously blown up a lot in the past few months, but you've been doing YouTube for a couple of years. Do you ever worry that like if you got to like 1 million subscribers or people, everyone would be like, oh, there's UnderTheMayo or something? Or do you mind that being sort of your name online?
I'm used to it. I mean, people have been calling me Mayo for 9 years now, so it's fine.
Yeah, but it just seems in my head, like whenever I think about it, like, because mayo's obviously a condiment, like, just
right.
like for the fact that like it just has the word lost meaning for you now, or is it just?
Well, everyone asks me if I love putting mayo on everything, and on a sandwich, sure, it's great, but I don't really eat that much mayo, and I don't eat that many sandwiches either. But I mean, I'm fine with being called it because I made my YouTube channel during the Mortal Kombat 9 strategy days, and there are 2 other players in the Mortal Kombat scene. There are twin brothers named Ketchup and Mustard.
Yeah.
And so I just became very comfortable with the Mayo name because, hey, there's 2 other condiments in the community anyway, so that's cool.
There's definitely some good
And everyone
sponsorship
asks
ideas out
me
there.
like, asks me like, so what is Under the Mayo? And I mean, my answer is always bread, right? I mean, like, what other answer could there be, right? You don't put mayo on top of something other than bread. So
Oh yeah, that's a good answer in
yeah,
fairness.
it's a riveting conversation we're having here.
um, let's talk a little bit about your content then. So most people will know you. I know you started off with Mortal Kombat originally, but most people will know you for your Doom content, and more specifically Doom Eternal, because that's kind of where your channel
Mhm.
blew up. I think around 8 months ago now, when the game first came out. But people,
Right.
I think, often associate your channel with solely Doom, which, even to me, when I was first researching your channel after watching you for a few months, that was my first initial impression. But when you look at your most viewed videos, only one of them out of the top five is a Doom Eternal video. So, how would you
That's right.
describe your YouTube content?
I like my content being analysis focused, design focused,
Mm-hmm.
um, strategy focused. I like talking about things that I think are really interesting in the design of games. You'll notice that I don't talk whole lot about the music or the art style in games. I'm usually talking about their systems, how they play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when the Doom Eternal content took off, that was totally unexpected because for a few years, one of my best friends kept telling me, "Hey, you should really focus on YouTube stuff," and I was like, no, I don't know if I want to do that." But in 2019, I had the idea to do my big God of War, how God of War was ruined video,
Mm-hmm.
and I put like 300 hours into it. It's almost an hour long, and it's up there with my best work, I think. And I had no expectations for it. I released it on the anniversary of the game, and I was like, this could get 200 views. It could get 200,000 views. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the first was true. It got like 1,000 views in a year. So I was like, okay, that's fine. And then I did a little Resident Evil 3 video later and a best of later in the year. And so, given the success or the lack of success of that God of War video and all the work that I put into it, which is something that many YouTubers are familiar with. I mean, the most people on YouTube put a lot of work into videos and then they see nothing for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I put out the Marauder video, I wasn't expecting anything. I thought maybe a few hundred people, maybe 1,000 might see it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just say, I'm gonna say this because no one else seems to be saying it, or if they're saying it, they're not saying it the right way. And I put it out there, and 200 views. Oh, the next day, 500 views. The next day, 2,000 views. Oh, wow, okay. And then the next day, 10,000 views. Holy shit, what's going on? And so I saw that it was taking off, but not only was it getting the views, I was also getting the subscribers, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a big thing because you'll see videos out there on YouTube that have millions of views on a channel that only has a few thousand subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
So views do not necessarily translate to people subscribing to your channel, but I was getting both. And so I was like, okay, so people like the video, but they're also interested to see what I might do next. And so I very quickly put out videos talking about things that were not Doom Eternal. If you look
Yeah.
at that, if you go back to the Marauder video in March, the next few videos talk about the future of my channel. I do a video talking about Prison Architect. I do a video
Mm-hmm.
talking about Mortal Kombat 9 Quan Chi. I wanted to send a message very strongly and very quickly that I am interested in taking this channel seriously, but I am not a Doom channel.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have done like 40 videos about Doom Eternal, but that's because I'm so interested in its design and I find the conversation very stimulating. But the last thing I want to be is just a channel that talks about Doom because I talk about Doom because of how interesting its systems are, and I see very interesting systems in other games as well, and not just action games and in all kinds of games.
Mm-hmm. Despite your big audience coming in from Doom Eternal, were you surprised to see that, even your God of War video you talked about saw a resurgence and kind of blew up on its own right as well? Were you surprised to see it get a
Yeah,
lot more views?
uh, yeah, I was surprised because I didn't know how this YouTube thing works. I guess I still don't.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like I guess people started going back into my content and watching that video, and then it started getting picked up because I guess it had high retention, and so it just started getting picked up in the algorithm, and now it's now I feel like it got the views that it deserved, and so I'm really happy about that.
Mhm. You talked a little bit earlier about, how you started off with Mortal Kombat, and then we talked a bit about Doom and God of War. But what initially was your kind of drive for making YouTube videos? Because obviously at the beginning it wasn't your typical analytical style content. So what was the
Right.
main drive at the beginning?
Um, well, I have to give a little bit of history here. Uh, when Mortal Kombat 9 came out in 2011, the competitive scene was in its infancy.
Mhm.
Like Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom, Tekken, like they've had established tournament scenes since the 90s. And Mortal Kombat never really did. I mean, there were competitive tournaments, right? But you never saw Mortal Kombat on the world stage at Evo or anything.
Mhm.
And with Mortal Kombat 9, that was the first game to actually do that. And so it had this huge influx of Mortal Kombat players who wanted to take the game seriously on a competitive level. But because it was so young and no one knew what they were doing, and we didn't have talented people in the community who knew how to produce quality video content, right?
Mhm.
And so you'd have someone making a post on a Mortal Kombat forum with some kind of new tech discovery strategy for Melina, and but the video would be just like their 2009 cell phone leaning against a book filming the television, and while they're trying to do the move and they fail like 4 times in a row, but they don't edit that out of the video, and then they put that into some free video editor, and then they put white text over it with no shadow so you can't read it, and then they put death metal music over it. And it's just like the state of Mortal Kombat strategy videos was embarrassing. And I had years experience with video editing, not on a pro level, but I've always kind of had an eye for editing and pacing and flow and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And and I've always had kind of a narrative voice as well, ever since I was a teenager. So uh, I wanted to talk about my character Quan Chi,
Mhm.
and I said, okay, you know what? I'm gonna step up, man. Somebody needs to make a badass strategy guide for a character, but something that is chill, something you can sit back and have a snack and watch and not just learn from, but enjoy.
Mhm.
And so I wrote a script, recorded it, put the transitions in there, got the gameplay, clearly said what it was. I put some Silent Hill music in the background, and that's why you can't see my old Mortal Kombat stuff anymore, because it all got blocked because it uses copyrighted music. But
Mhm.
it was fine in 2011. And so I put it out there, and I was like, hey, I just uploaded this video. I put it on the forums. I said, hey, here's my video, and it just blew up. There was an influx of like thousands of new Quan Chi players online, wreaking havoc. and uh, and then I just got known as the guy who made cool strategy guides and the guy who studied the game on like a mathematical level.
Mhm.
That's how I started really developing strategies that were based around meter building strategies and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And that's what I did for a few years, and that was what my channel was created for and what it focused on.
Mhm. That's actually, it's interesting that you brought up that your initial content was kind of, it was obviously strategy based content in the sense, but it was also meant to
Yeah,
be enjoyed and entertained and at your own leisure. And like that, obviously,
absolutely.
that still follows over, I think, to even your videos that you create now, even though the more analytical stuff, because your videos,
Hmm.
majority of them, bar a few outliers, are generally, 10 to 15 minutes long, and they focus on very key elements of, say, a game you want to talk about. But it's done in a way that it's presented that you could almost passively have it on in the background and just listen to, which I think is a skill that most YouTubers struggle to kind of get right. So I think you do that in a really interesting way. So I'm glad to hear that that was kind of your beginning offset idea as well, and that's definitely something that's carried through the years, I think.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate that. That's definitely one of my goals. My favorite YouTube channels, um, if we're talking about something like Red Letter Media or
mhm.
something. Uh, but yeah, like I can throw on an episode of Best of the Worst while I'm cooking, and even if I've already seen the episode like 10 times, it's just soothing
Mhm.
to hear the video in the background because of its flow and its editing and all that kind of stuff. And so I take a lot of influence from those kinds of videos that I like to repeat view almost like I would a music album.
Mhm.
So that the entertainment aspect of videos is really important. And sometimes that leads to me cutting sections of videos that I think are important to discuss, and just because maybe it goes on too long and distracts from the flow.
Yeah, of course, because I think even from a sense when we were talking about, how YouTube kind of picks up videos there a while back, um, having media that's very easily bingeable, which I think your stuff kind of uh, is a lot more beneficial for YouTube, I think, in that sense. So if someone comes across your channel, but say they don't have the time to dedicate and sit down and actively watch a video, your content very much caters to the people who, want to do, as you said, do a bit of cooking in the background or whatnot, and, kind of just listen
Hmm.
away. And I think YouTube, in a sense, kind of caters to that in sense of, and you talked about, a video, you don't want it to get too long or too extra. But, YouTube videos, I think in general are either catered to be 10 minutes long or an hour long. And there's this sort of that like bit in the middle that, it's the uncharted area. Like you won't see on YouTube many 20-minute, 30-minute videos. It'll usually be either relatively short or extremely long, which I think is kind of the sweet spot for most people. So you definitely have that down, especially, you talk about your more concise reviews, like something like your Dusk review, I think is about just over 10 minutes long, but then your God of War
Yeah.
video is an hour over long. So it kind of caters to both
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. It depends on what you're talking about. Usually if I'm on a focused topic,
Mm-hmm.
and I never set out to make a short or a long video. I just start writing my script
Mm-hmm.
and I just put it together. And then however long it is, that's how long it is. It just happens to be where that 6 to 10 minute time is good for a single topic. And if I'm diving deeper into something, if I have a lot of strong feelings about something, that's when I start getting 40 plus. That's when you get into
Mm-hmm.
my Devil May Cry 5 video and God of War and Alien Isolation, where it doesn't happen often. But occasionally I am inspired to go in hard on something. And when I do, I'm never trying to make it an hour. It just ends up that way. And a lot of times I've actually cut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Alien Isolation video is like, I want to say it's 50 minutes. It was an hour. I cut 10 minutes out of it. Um, but yeah, like things just end up how they end up.
Mm-hmm. You recently I think you rebranded one of your series to People Have Been Asking Me to Play. And your most
Mhm.
recent video on that series was on Hades. So obviously these recommendations for games are coming from your viewers or your subscribers or whatnot. Have there been games that they've recommended to you and you've started playing and you're like, okay, I'm going to do a review on this, but then you found that you just don't enjoy the game, so you've just scrapped a script idea completely?
Well, that is actually not the way I approach it. I never go into a game with the intention of reviewing it.
Mm-hmm.
I go into a game neutral to play and enjoy the game. And if I observe things and the experience inspires me to talk about it, then I make the decision to make a video.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, people have sent me games. Like this is weird. Um, because I have a channel that talks about games, people assume that I play everything, and I don't. I've never been that way my whole life. My whole life, I've played 2 or 3 games a year, but the games I play, I go in deep with them,
Mm-hmm.
and I play them like religiously, and I love to analyze them. And there's positives and negatives to that. The positive is that I have a really deep understanding of these games that I love, but the negative is that I miss out on a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so this year has been very strange because a lot of people in my community are just gifting me games. I'm not complaining that, I mean, they're free games. It's great, right? But I'm not used to that. I'm not used to playing 7 to 10 different games a month. That is just crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of games that I play them for a few hours and I'm like, okay, I get it. Fine. All right. And I don't really have anything to say. A video would be like a minute. And so I take people's recommendations. I always take them seriously. I always try to go in with an open mind and give it a chance. Um, and occasionally something will hit that spark where I'm like, oh wow, this would be interesting to talk about. Whether I like something or not, if I think it would be interesting to talk about it, then I will, and then I start getting into the artistic inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm never going to talk about Dark Souls because I don't want to talk about Dark Souls. There's nothing that inspires me to talk about it. But a game like Titanfall 2, um, like the issues I have with Titanfall 2, I thought were interesting conversation points, interesting things to talk about and think about.
Mm-hmm.
and that's much better that's much better to do a video on than something that I just simply don't like for personal reasons.
Mhm. Have you so you did I think it's a I'm not sure how long ago this video was now. It's not too long ago, but it was you reviewing different movies and sort of recommending them to your subscribers. Have you thought about doing
Yeah.
something maybe in the similar sort of format, kind of doing quick reviews on games that your viewers have, say, gifted you?
Um, no, I don't think so, because uh, that movie series is not like, I'm not just casually talking about movies that I think are just fine.
Mhm.
I'm quickly presenting movies that I think are great or have something really great about them, and that is a very long list of movies, and that would be a very short list of games.
Mhm. Um,
If I did that for games, I would run out of games to talk about in about 3 months.
let's just so what about games then in specifically in specificity is like why do you love them so much? Like what is it about games that kind of, encourages you to kind of play them or even just to make content on them?
Um, I guess the games that I like the most are the ones that inspire me to look deeper into their systems, like to really figure out how they're played. I love a game with great pacing, with great flow. Um, but like people seem to think all I want is a good fast action game when it's just not true. I mean, sure, some of my favorite games are like that, but
Mm-hmm.
if Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3 are some of my favorite games of all time, obviously I don't need everything to be a fast, tight action experience. I mean, the action in those games is like the least good thing about them. It's hard to put my finger on what I like about a game. I guess I just need to feel like all of its elements work together and complement each other. I guess that's the best way I can put it.
Mm-hmm. Is there any game you've particularly enjoyed in the past or you're enjoying right now that you might think about, doing a video on the future that you haven't got around to yet?
I would love to do a big video about Prey. I talked about Prey twice in my Alien Isolation
Mm-hmm.
video and my Alien compared to Prey video. But Prey is such a complicated experience that I would really need to just sit down for a month and dedicate myself to it. And I'm just not mentally prepared to do that. But
This
yeah,
is
there's
the
of course there's games. Hmm?
this is the Bethesda title for people wondering, is it?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
Prey 2017,
perfect. Yeah.
which is a game that I absolutely love. But yeah, I mean, there's so many games that I would like to talk about. Fear from 2005, I'd like to
Mm.
talk about. I want to talk about Resistance, the first PlayStation title. Um, some shooters, but there's also, indie games like Slay the Spire. I definitely want to talk about that someday. Um, I'm going to do a video soon on Emily is Away, which is a free to play conversation simulator.
Mm.
Um, but a lot of these games that I know that I want to talk about are low priority for me because they're not time sensitive. If something comes out like Hades and I play it, I'll give that priority. I'd rather talk about that now when people are talking about it
Mm-hmm.
than talk about it in 2 months. And so if something is time sensitive that I'm working on, I'll put that as priority. I'm going to talk about the new Doom Eternal master level before I publish a video on like an indie game from 5 years ago that I want to talk about, because I
Right.
can come back to that stuff whenever I want it.
Mm-hmm. Um, let's so you a couple of months ago again, and I know I've been saying a couple of months ago a lot, but it's important to remember that a lot of your main content is sort of surfaced in the last few months. You started up a podcast, the Doom Eternal unofficial podcast with P&D Ketchup and the Spud Hunter. How did that opportunity come about?
I've known Ketchup, like not known him. I mean, we've chatted because we both played Quan Chi in Mortal Kombat X,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, he got into YouTube stuff in that year, and we just kind of started talking because we were both playing Doom Eternal, and he said he really liked my content, and I was like, hey, we should do something together, because I always wanted to do something with him. And I was like, man, I said we should start a podcast or something, because no one had a Doom podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was so much to talk about. And so we started looking for a guest, for another host, and he recommended the Spud Hunter. I think that was his recommendation. And then I didn't know him, so we got in touch. We put it together, and just happened, right? It was I put it together, so I mean that's kind of why I act as host. That's just my personality, right? And,
Mhm.
um, but it is a very open format. Anybody can talk about whatever they want, and it's I don't know. It's been going pretty good. We have a new episode coming out um, tomorrow morning. Actually, we got it's an interview with the creator of Dusk, David Zemansky.
Oh, exciting! I'll really be looking forward to that one. Because actually, funny enough, actually, you bring up Dusk because I actually had no idea what Dusk was until your video introduced me to it, and now I think it's one of my most played games on Steam. I absolutely adore it. Um, so I
Oh
suppose,
yeah, man! I'm so proud to have given that game more exposure.
mhm. Actually, that actually brings up an interesting topic because you've done a few um videos on games that possibly aren't as much in the limelight as say games like Doom Eternal and whatnot. Is there any game in particular that you think you've actively contributed to bringing more traction to it?
Yeah, Duskers for sure.
Hmm.
Duskers, that video took off. I had no idea why, and the sales of it definitely went up, and there was a huge influx of new players into their Discord community. So yeah, I that and Into the Breach as well.
Yeah.
Like those two and the Dusk video, those three, I have definitely brought new people to those games, and that's the whole point, right? Like
Hmm.
sometimes I get accused of making these videos like commercials, and I'm like, well, yeah, like I'm trying to tell people why these games are so great and then why they should play them. So yeah.
Have you had any of the like developers of that from those two games, reach out to you to say that, thanks for doing this or whatnot?
No, I mean they don't write to me and say, hey, thanks for talking about my game. But I have had a little Twitter correspondence with the creator of Duskers.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I mean, he was very happy to see it. Like, I don't remember what he said. Maybe he said, thank you for making the video. I don't remember. It was months ago.
Hmm.
But I'm sure he was happy to see it and that people were appreciating his game. And also Cry of Fear. I published a video on that in October, and that actually did really well.
Hmm.
And the creator of that game commented on there and said, thanks for making the video and showing off his game. So, yeah. So, yeah, there's definitely been some appreciation out there. Feels good.
Yeah, 100%. Like especially for those smaller creators as well. I think it's always great because it probably is a beneficial sense in both ways because one, you're making a video on a game that doesn't have as much exposure. So then if people start looking for it, yours is going to be high up in the search results and whatnot. And plus, it's also a game you enjoy.
Mhm.
But also for them as well, it gives them some exposures from creators as well. So sales only go up for them. So it's a win-win for I think both you and the creator in that sense.
Yeah, I'm starting to get contacted by more indie developers who are sending me like Steam codes to try out their game because they want me to talk about it, right?
Mhm.
Of course, and it's good for me because I can talk about it and get the traffic. It's a mutual relationship. But I haven't actually talked about anything that's been sent to me other than BPM. But there are some other games out there that I try out, and it's just I can never promise a developer that I'll make a video. Like I don't want to get into that habit. I'll make a video if I want to talk about it.
Mhm. One of the things I mentioned before we started recording was that some of your older videos had been, one of them is you speed running Resident Evil, and obviously since then on the podcast that we talked about, you had Carl Jobston, who's obviously very well known amongst the speedrunning community. Like he pretty much, I think it would be arguable to say that he's the granddaddy of all speedrunning content on YouTube. But is there maybe?
Depending on your scene, summoning salt. He's a bigger channel. He gets he has bigger videos, but his stuff is more like Nintendo focused, or like
Mhm.
a lot of his stuff is like Mario Kart, Punch Out, stuff like that. And then Carl Jobs is where you're gonna find stuff like Doom and
Mhm.
GoldenEye. So, but yeah, Carl Jobs is definitely like up there. Like his face would be on the Mount Rushmore of speedrunning content for sure.
Do you see yourself maybe returning to speedrunning at some stage, maybe with even Doom Eternal or?
No, no, I don't. Speedrunning to me ruins games. Like the only reason did a speed run for Resident Evil is because I've been playing that game for 20 years and I know it inside and out. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to learn how to speedrun it. That looks fun.
Mhm.
But once you speedrun a game, you can't unsee that. You can't unsee the code, right? You'll never be scared of a zombie again if you learn how to speedrun. You'll never be scared of a dog. You'll never walk around that corner and be like, oh man, I don't remember if there's a zombie here or not. I better be careful. You can never have that experience again.
Mhm.
And I can't casually play Resident Evil ever again. And that's okay. I got everything I could out of that game, and so that's why I will never speedrun Doom or Doom Eternal, because I still like the not knowing. I mean, there's obviously things that I've memorized just out of habit, but I never want to break down the game and memorize where every enemy is going to spawn and when and what kill triggers what enemy arriving and what combo is best in what part. And I never want to think about the game that way, um because I like the improvisation of it.
Mhm.
I like the chaotic moments. That's what keeps it fun to me.
Mhm. Does that so that actually brings up an interesting point, because in your last video about Hades, obviously Hades is a game that, if you go into a new room, it's going to be different from the last time you played it. Do you think there's a good niche there? Would you enjoy something along that lines if it was in the Doom Eternal format?
Um, well, like room randomizations and stuff like that, I don't think that would be possible in a AAA game like Doom. But uh, randomized enemy encounters could be cool, but like they meticulously lay out how fights go,
Hmm.
right? Like here's 5 cyber mancubi, and when you kill 2 of them, now the pain elementals show up. Like it's all very meticulously thought out. And so just having random enemies appear in there, um, I just I don't know if that would be the right thing to do. You need to have this stuff well thought out.
Mhm.
Now, I would like some randomization. Like I would like I'd like tentacle placement to be randomized, like stuff like that. But other than that, I like Doom being a structured experience.
Mhm. Um, with regards to, say, like, we talked a little bit about Doom, but your videos very much are, strategy sort of guides, almost, trying out new variants for mods of weapons and everything, and kind of testing all that stuff out. Are you a fan of the story of Doom Eternal?
Yeah, I am. I think it's cool. I know it, but that's as far as I go with it. I don't watch videos that explain. Like in the first month, I watched some videos explaining what was going on, and I read some of the stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I like this. I like the story of it a lot."
Hmm.
But I don't go any further than that. That's just not my interest. I'm not going to, spend years examining it like I am the Silent Hill series or something.
Hmm.
I like the setup, I like the characters, and then that's about as far as I go.
Yeah. If we're going to talk about, just because obviously Doom Eternal still has another DLC to come out in this season, Ancient Gods Part 2, how do you think they're going to expand upon what was already a fantastic first DLC?
Well, I mean, we'll have some new enemy types.
Hmm.
If I don't expect a new weapon, though, I could imagine maybe a new grenade type.
Hmm.
And God, it's. I think that there's going to be enemies that mix things up more, right? Like the Marauder, right? When there's a Marauder in a fight, the fight feels different.
Hmm.
And like a Marauder in the room with a couple of Barons feels totally different than a Marauder when you're surrounded by fog and there's a single turret shooting at you.
Hmm.
Like it feels totally different, even though it's the same enemy. And that's what's so cool about Doom Eternal, is how they're able to make things feel very fresh by changing the environment, changing the situation, changing the enemy types. And like a room, you can have a crazy room, right? And if you take that same crazy fight and now you add carcasses, like things are different now. Things have changed. And that's what I really like about it. And that's what I like about the new enemy types as well, right? Like a fight that contains a spirit feels different. A fight that contains blood makers feels different.
Hmm.
And I'm expecting more enemy types that mix things up. And I think people are worried that the next enemy types are gonna I guess, follow the trend of the first DLC enemy types, and I don't see that happening, because the spirit can only be killed with the microwave beam. Okay, but that's the only weapon. That's the only enemy that functions that way.
Mhm.
The Bloodmaker is invulnerable until it opens itself up, and that's the only enemy that functions like that. And so I'm not expecting more enemies that function like that. I'm expecting other enemies that function their own ways, and I
Mhm.
think it'll be fun.
Yeah, of course. I know you made a video on it recently, but if they brought in the zombie chain gunners as well, like I don't know how, like, me trying to comprehend how they would make already such a fantastic game even better. Like, it feels like, you know, the way they always say that there's no limit to like how far you can go, but I feel like these like, in my mind, can't even comprehend what they do better at this stage. It feels like they've done
Yeah,
so much. Like, because even recently I went back to play Doom 2016, and I just can't. Like, it's just impossible to go back from something that
I
at
have
the
a hard
time,
time as well.
yeah, because it seemed so, like, it's obviously a great game and it felt so much
Yeah.
more great at the time as well. But going back to it now, it feels so simplistic in comparison.
Yeah, and that's never happened to me, right? Like, Mortal Kombat 3 doesn't make Mortal Kombat 2 unplayable.
Hmm.
Resident Evil 2 doesn't make Resident Evil 1 unplayable. Like that, it's never happened to me ever, where I love a game so much and then the sequel comes out and I can't play the first one anymore. That's the first time for me, and that's just incredible.
Hmm. I think interesting enough, like, because I'm probably in the minority. I think more people are going to appreciate it, but I actually quite like Doom 3. Um, but like, I think maybe it's the sense that it's just such a different game that when I go back to it, I almost don't think of it in the same realm as, you know, Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. It just seems like such a completely different franchise at that stage that I kind of still can enjoy it for what it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Doom 3 is its own thing, and that's fine. Doom can exist in many different ways.
Hmm. Could you like, knowingly now, could you go back to, say, you know, 1993 Doom and Doom 2, like, without mods or whatever, and play that casually, or would that just not be interesting to you?
I do that regularly, actually.
Hmm.
I like going back and playing the old game. I especially like playing Final Doom.
Yeah, 100%. Um, so we've been talking about your channel for a little bit. What aspect of your channel would you say you're probably most proud of?
Um, I really like focusing on perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When someone says that something is bad, I mean, sometimes it is bad, but sometimes it is a matter of perspective. Maybe you're looking at something the wrong way, or maybe it's the wrong approach. We've all had those moments where, like, we saw a movie and we didn't like it, and then 10 years we watched it again and we're like, oh wait, actually this is pretty great. Like, the movie didn't change, you changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really happy that some of my videos on Doom Eternal have helped people enjoy the game more, right? The Marauder is the big example of that, right? Like, there's people who did not like fighting the Marauder, and
Mm-hmm.
then they watched one of my videos on him, and then it just clicked, and suddenly they're like, oh yeah, it's not about telling them the secret to killing the Marauder. That's not it. It's about changing your perspective of how to enjoy the fight against him
Mm-hmm.
and how to enjoy the game better as a whole. Maybe there's an aspect of the game that you didn't like. And I was like, well, maybe if you think about how that aspect is making you better in other areas, right? Like the platforming in Doom Eternal. I mean, the platforming isn't anything special, but it does teach new players very valuable skills in combat. When you're doing platforming, you are timing your double air dash to reach long distances. You are spinning around in the air quickly. You're shooting targets in the air. There's you're managing your dash recharges.
Mm-hmm.
You're climbing up on surfaces. There's and all of that stuff directly translates to the combat arena. You're doing all those things in combat. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you get to the point where you're flying through the platforming sections, that has actually made you a better fighter, and you don't even realize it. You don't even realize that you're moving better in the combat arenas because of what the platforming sections put you through. And so I think that a lot of this stuff has to do with perspective. And I've gotten a lot of messages from people that say that they've watched my videos and that I've helped them enjoy the game more. and that maybe they didn't love the game the first time they played it, and then they watched my videos, they watched my beginner's guide or whatever,
Mhm.
and then they played it again, and now they absolutely love it. That's probably what I'm the most proud of on my channel.
Yeah, because it's interesting that you bring up the platforming again, because there's a really whenever I hear people talk about Doom Eternal who probably don't dedicate it as much time to it as maybe the average player of Doom would, the one thing I always hear is, oh, the platforming is, either it's substandard or it takes you away from the action. But the way I've always seen the platforming in Doom Eternal is it's kind of more of an interactive tutorial that doesn't feel like a tutorial. Like, there's always the question of how do you seamlessly put a tutorial into a game without it feeling forced. And games like, I don't know if you played the Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, like, it has a very sort of witty way of kind of introducing the player to new items by kind of making fun of the whole, basic tutorial in games, like, here's how to run, here's how to crouch. But Doom kind of makes it feel like part of the gameplay without you knowing that it's a tutorial of how to get around the place, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Speaking on Doom Eternal just a little bit more, though, obviously tonight's the night for the Game Awards. It's been nominated for quite a few, bits: Game of the Year, Score, Audio Design, Best Action. Are you confident that it'll win? Because obviously there's a really good lineup for games this year, and I think Game of the Year is the most contentious one, to be honest. And Score as well has some really fantastic music in it as well. Obviously, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is one of my favorites, but I'm kind of, do I want it to win? Do I want Doom to win? Because Doom's music is fantastic as well. Do you think there's any category that it has the best chance of winning in?
I think that it, I think that it I mean, like, obviously, I think it deserves Game of the Year, right? But like, all those games are so different, right? Like, how do you really say which one is the best? It's hard.
Yeah.
I go with Doom Eternal because I think what it does in its priority of its systems and its design is very important, and I don't see that in the other games. I think that it objectively deserves Best Action Game and Best Sound Design, because not only is the sound design, I'm not talking about music, I'm talking about sound design. The way that Doom communicates information to the player through sound is brilliant. That you can play the game with no HUD and always know when you have chainsaw, blood punch, grenades, and flame belts just by the sound.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good. I think it deserves to win that.
Yeah, even for telegraphed attacks as well, like, sound is a key factor. Like, you mentioned the Marauder earlier. Like, obviously you can you can even imagine the sound it makes in your head without even having to see it. And as well with
there's so many enemies. You hear a Marauder go, "Raw," and you're like, oh shit, there's a Marauder here.
Even with the Tyrant as well, like, you can hear when he's about to launch his missiles as well. But the visual representation of the glyphs on the ground as well obviously point that out. But what's the one thing I was going to say? Yeah, actually, it brings back an interesting point, because you were talking about Game of the Year, and the games are so different. I always find it interesting because, looking at this year, like, you can argue that The Last of Us 2 is obviously a very contentious issue for most people. Well, for people, I think, very active in the game community. I think outside of it, it's a little bit less contentious. But it brings up an interesting question, because Doom is obviously not very story-based. It's much more gameplay-driven. Like, the gameplay is what sells Doom Eternal. But I think for most people, when playing The Last of Us, it's the story that, is first and foremost, and then gameplay is kind of just an added on. So, like, what is it, do you think, is that, like, what is the core thing that makes a game of the year? Is it the story? Is it the gameplay? Is it a mix of the both? Or does it just really depend?
Man, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it comes down to a selection of games that makes people feel like they're not playing with toys when really they are playing with toys. Like these ultra serious games, which, I mean, fine, they're great games, but like with God of War 2018, right? Like, when that game came out, and it just felt so okay, now let's be serious. This is a serious art form now. This is not a video game. This is art. Like, and I'm just like, come on, fuck off, man. Right? And so, that's where you get, Last of Us 2, and that's where Ghost of Tsushima. I'm not saying that Ghost of Tsushima is a bad game. No, absolutely not. But, it's a very serious, we're taking this seriously. This is not just, we're not just playing video games here. having a serious artistic experience. And I think that definitely helps you. You know, like the same thing with Oscar bait, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you make a serious drama about the struggle of a Hollywood screenwriter in the 1950s trying to get his script made, and no one sees the movie, but it's nominated for Best Picture, right?
Yeah.
Like we have the same thing in the gaming industry, and it's nice that something like Doom Eternal also gets nominated when it is a combat focused game, but it also has great art and has great level design and great music. It has everything that it needs to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that every other nominee does, if that makes sense.
Because I always find it interesting, because I was even when I was looking at the nominees this year, I was like, who in their right mind like thought that putting like, I know it's a meme, but putting Animal Crossing and Doom Eternal in the same category for you to then objectively pick which one you think is better, like when they're two completely different formats completely. But I think in one way it's interesting for the Game Awards, because obviously the Oscars are picked by an associated board or whatever it is, but like obviously the main lineup is picked by a board for the Game Awards, but then it's the viewership that pick it. So I don't know if there's a sense of like, even if you don't win it, I think probably getting nominated is the real victory, because once you put it out into the public realm and you like, you know, people can make like 5 accounts and vote for the same game they want. Like, so is winning it really that important at the end of the day? Like I had an interview with Gareth Coker there the other week, who's the composer for Ori, and he was saying that like most of the time, because Ori and the Blind Forest got nominated for best score back in 2015, and this is the year, I think, the year just before Mick Gordon won. And he was saying that, you know, most of the time, you know, if you get nominated, you're already celebrating, because, you know, whether you win it or not is not really the important thing. It's the fact that I think there's such a good standard for games that, you know, it's just down to popularity at that stage, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So we were talking just a little bit before we started recording about Cyberpunk, and, you know, I was surprised to hear you were playing it. But the question now is, you know, obviously we're coming up to the Game of the Year season, Game Awards, you know, Cyberpunk has come out and people have been waiting years for this game. Do you have any plans on doing a video of it in the future?
I'm tossing around the idea of doing a video on it. I'm playing it not out of interest, but out of, like, it's a big game of the generation, right? Like, everyone's going to be talking about this game for a while, and everyone's going to be asking me what I think about it. So I'm playing it. I'm about 6 hours in, and I have not enjoyed a single moment. I think I might hate this game, but I'm going to keep going, right? Because it's a big game, so I need to play more of it and see what's going on. But so far, I'm not impressed with a single aspect of it, other than maybe some graphics. And if I do a video on it, if I continue to feel this way, and I do a video like it, I mean, I'll probably be crucified. Like, I'm sorry, man. Like, the things I see, I can't unsee. And so far, I'm having a miserable experience, and so I'm sure it'll be a miserable video.
Well, I suppose there's no you're not new to the whole thing of, you know, reasonably disliking something that there's a huge cult following behind, like, you know, the new God of War game. You know, people like it, and obviously, you know, you put support some, like, actually when I watched your video initially, you know, I was actually a very big fan of God of War 2018. Not enough to be like, oh, I'll replay it. I don't normally, most of the time if I play a game like that, I play it once and I enjoy it and then I move on. But like when I played it first, I enjoyed the story. But when you were explaining all the stuff, it's like, oh yeah, that really is boring combat. Like, it feels really tedious and you're always doing the same stuff over and again. And there's times when I was playing where I was like, I really want to skip this, but it didn't clock to me at the time. So you mentioned perspective, and like, obviously I think that's something your videos have done, like especially with that God of War video. Even the Resident Evil 3 video as well is another one as well, which kind of got a bit of backlash, but I think it was unnecessary as well, because a lot of the time the people who backlash those videos aren't watching the full thing or are just refusing to take in what you're saying, I think. So added to the holy trinity, I think.
Listen.
Yeah.
So Cyberpunk, I don't know what you were saying.
And I was just going to say the Cyberpunk will probably make up the holy trinity of the Mayo hates these games that everyone loves category, will it?
Yeah, people are going to say, you want this to be like Doom Eternal. It's like, no, I don't. I want it to be, actually, you know, I'd be a lot happier if it was more similar to Prey, to be honest.
Actually,
Um,
yeah.
but you know,
I noticed on one of your community posts on YouTube you were talking about how you're going to leave out a part of a video which referenced I can't remember which game it was because you were going to reference it to Doom Eternal, and you were going to leave it
yeah.
out because you didn't want your channel to be exclusively seen as this Doom Eternal channel. But then if you did leave it out, people were going to be like, "But it does this in Doom Eternal, and why do you like it there but not here?" Does that annoy you in certain sense that you kind of have this obligation to compare everything to Doom Eternal?
Yeah, well, it's because in some of my earlier videos, I would make the comparison to Doom Eternal. Like I'd talk about Titanfall 2,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd be like, "Hey, I like the platforming in Titanfall 2. It's pretty cool. I just wish that it was better integrated into the combat scenarios, like Doom Eternal." And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, come on, like, how can you not make that comparison, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, why are you comparing this to Doom Eternal? They're not the same game." I'm like, "I know, but like they share concepts, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I started getting some people who were saying, "You want everything to be like Doom Eternal." I was like, "No, I really don't. I mean, I want things to be well designed, right? And it just happens to be that Doom Eternal is very well designed, and that's the game I'm playing right now." Um, and so now I'm in a situation where, like you said, if I make the comparison in a video, then there are people who get upset that I'm comparing it to Doom Eternal.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't make the comparison, there will be all these other people who are upset with me for criticizing something that also exists in Doom Eternal, but in a different way. And then they make the false comparison, and now I have to deal with that.
So it's a
So
lose lose
I really
situation.
can't. It's a lose lose situation. I can't do it. And so what I'm starting to do now is I'm putting in this little 2-second scene missing clip
Mm-hmm.
where when I come up to a point where I could mention Doom Eternal, I just put this little scene there. And so in my Devil May Cry 5 camera video, I was going to talk about the first levels of Doom Eternal, introducing their concepts, and it was like a 3-minute section, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna cut it and see if people actually say the shit that I think they're gonna say, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I just put that little scene missing thing in there to represent that I cut out a section of Doom Eternal. But now I'm just putting it in videos at points in the script where I could talk about Doom Eternal, but I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my Hades video, I was writing the script and I started talking about how I wish, like, I love the mechanics, I love the combat, I love the upgrades and everything, but I wish Hades was more of like a structured 8 to 10 hour campaign,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that I could play all the way through and get the story through there and then repeat the campaign with the modifiers and the upgrades and stuff like that. Instead of it being 4 levels that have like randomly generated aspects, I'd rather have it just like a long, dedicated, structured campaign. And my immediate thought was people are going to be like, "Oh, so like Doom Eternal." Right? And so, and I didn't even write a section talking about Doom Eternal, but I knew that there would be some assholes out there who would think that I'm talking about Doom Eternal just because I said structured campaign, even though there's thousands of games with structured campaigns. Just mentioning something that Doom Eternal has,
Mm-hmm.
they are gonna think that I'm talking about Doom Eternal. So I just put that little scene missing Doom Eternal reference in the video just as a little nudge at those people, like, I could mention Doom Eternal right here, but I'm not going to. But I'm going to put this here just to irritate you. That's been I am working on a video that talks about this. I think one of the most frustrating things that has come from this YouTube career has been people not understanding that challenge based player engagement is not unique to Doom Eternal.
Mm-hmm.
Doom Eternal is not the only game to push you into its systems through challenge or restrictions on the player.
Mm-hmm.
This, like Resident Evil, right? I'll talk about this in my video. Like Resident Evil, how do you play Resident Evil? Well, what is involved in playing Resident Evil well and enjoying the experience? It's managing your inventory. It is exploring the map, looking for important resources, conserving ammo when possible, avoiding combat situations when you can, um, like all of this stuff is involved in, those are the systems of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to get into those systems by the restrictions the game puts on the player. They give you a small inventory, they give you a slow movement speed, they hide enemies behind corners, like the zombies do a lot of damage. You can't just drop items and pick them back up. All of these things create challenge that the player has to overcome, and it's not challenge based on combat. It's challenge based on resource management and exploration.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a game like Doom Eternal that pushes you into its systems through challenge. And if you played Resident Evil for this first time and they gave you like an infinite rocket launcher right from the start, the entire system would break down, because there would be no need to manage your inventory, because you wouldn't need to hold anything because you just have the rocket launcher.
Mhm.
You wouldn't need to carry any health items because you would be able to kill everything. You wouldn't really need to explore for anything other than puzzle items, because you don't need to find ammo or health or anything, right? Everything in the game would break down if the challenge didn't exist. And this is not something that people talk about, but we're talking about it now because Doom Eternal is the game that doubled down on that philosophy, and the developers were actually going out in public repeatedly talking about this, talking about how challenge pushes the player into the game systems. And this is something that has always been true. It's just that this seems like the first time that developers are actually talking about it publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why whenever I say, "Oh man, I wish the AI in Titanfall 2 was good enough to make me want to use the game systems instead of them just existing in a vacuum." And people were like, "Why do you want everything to be Doom Eternal?" Like, that is, it's not just infuriating, it's depressing. It's depressing that people don't realize that this is how you make good games, and that a good game doesn't just have cool things you can do. A good game makes cool things actually have tangible effects on the gameplay. And I will be doing a video about that in the next month or two.
Yeah, because it's interesting again that you bring that up, because even games that maybe aren't, that their core function isn't to maybe push that idea on you, and of course Doom puts it in a way that it seamlessly transitions into different bits, and you quickly learn which weapons are best for which. Like the grenade, the grenade launcher part of the shotgun is, and the the precision shot for the machine gun are best for taking out weak points and whatnot. But you learn that kind of in different games as well. And I know you've played Halo before. You did a video on it for your 50,000 subscriber special. Like, even though it doesn't push you in that direction, like, you quickly learn that, say, like, energy weapons are better against shields, bullets are better against just organics. And then of course, obviously, if you've gotten to the later levels, you'll know that the flood in that game as well, you can't melee the flood to death. It's more derived that you're meant to aim for a very specific spot of the flood to kill them quicker. So it puts forth this level of challenge, but it also makes it enjoyable. And I think the idea, some people seem to confuse total reign to do whatever you want as the ultimate idea of fun. But like, as someone who's played games like, say, Grand Theft Auto or whatnot, they don't really like, giving you everything in the world to do doesn't make that experience fun. I like being maybe given one aspect and being told what this does, and then you get the ultimate sort of, like, I don't know, serotonin booster, the ultimate best, most fun aspect out of it, when you are able to chain together specific things that do what they're meant to do, because it feels like you're progressing as a player, not only within the game, but playing the game how it was meant to be played, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the open world experience has really spoiled a lot of people, to where they think that fun is that the game says go wherever you want, do whatever you want, use whatever weapon you want, nothing matters. And I don't agree. Your Halo example is really good. I mean, I'm not a fan of Halo, but Halo is a very well designed game, right? Like, the systems of the game involve using cover to recharge your health, right? Like, strategically placing your shots and giving yourself enough time to reload. Using like those plasma grenades to stick the little guys, and then the little guys run back behind cover and they blow up their friends. Like these are all the systems of the game that wouldn't exist if there was no challenge, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you took Halo 1 and you gave Master Chief like a triple air dash, and you gave him like and you gave him the energy, the energy sword,
Don't threaten
that
us
would
with a
break
good time,
Halo
Mayo.
1. It would break the entire game, and you wouldn't need to engage in any of the systems.
Hmm.
And those systems are fun. Those systems are what make Halo what it is.
Mhm.
Now it's fun to replay games with, infinite ammo cheats and whatever, give yourself God mode. Yeah, that's cool, right? But now you're just screwing around. Now you're not actually playing the game, right? And like I said, if in Halo 1 you could double jump up in the air and do a triple air dash forward and then activate an invulnerability shield that recharges every 5 seconds and then go in and one hit melee everyone, there would be no reason to engage in any of the game systems.
Mhm. And it's not like
But
these.
the thing is, there would be people defending that design too. That's what's crazy about it.
Hmm.
There would be people defending that design and then criticizing you for not engaging in the game systems when the game actively sabotaged itself.
Mhm. I always find as well, especially and just to talk about Halo a bit more, the interesting part about it is that, it's very much rudimentary. The AI, I think, at the time were fantastically revolutionary with regards to enemy AI within games, and each of them kind of play off this synergy. And we talk about a bit about Doom. Each demon has their own sort of role to play. There's different attack variants and different ranges in which you engage them at and whatnot, and different weapons you use. Halo has this very like a complex AI system, I would say, in the sense that, if you meet a hunter, your initial first impression is that they're huge, like, and they're gonna, there's no way you can take them down. But you go behind them, you shoot them in the back, and pretty much, I think in Halo 1, the pistol kills them in one shot, which is ridiculous. But like, even if you come into a scenario where you have, the big elites and then you have the little grunts, like, there's two ways in which you can approach that scenario that are equally as valid, but still, play off the core mechanics. You can, first of all, kill the little guys so you have more time to focus on the big guy, or you can kill the big guy and then that puts all the little guys into like sort of disrepair and they don't know what to do. So it's two ways of approaching the same game or the same gameplay, and it's not limiting in a sense. And this idea of total freedom within a game, like, it doesn't make a game fun. Like, because I have gone back to play Doom Eternal with the cheat codes on. Like, I find so much more fun in starting up a new save with just the shotgun and working my way through the campaign again, rather than sticking on all the cheat codes and going through a mission, because there's no challenge in that, as you said, and there's no fun in that. Well, maybe there is at the first few times you play it, but over the long haul you're going to get bored of it.
Yeah, it's what you do when you're 7 years old, right? And you just want to give yourself God mode and run around and shoot things and watch them die, right? But like, we're supposed to be a little more sophisticated than that, right? We're supposed to want a little bit more from our games these days, right? More than just run around and watch things die. And I get that there are people who work 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and they have a family and they work 6 days a week and they come home and they just want to sit on the couch and pop on a game and just run around with a shotgun for a little bit, blasting people. And they don't want the game to be more than that. And I get that, man. And for those people, I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry. But we're doing something important here. We're raising the bar, and if you want to do that, you can pick up any other game. And I'm sorry that you can't enjoy Doom Eternal without like having to think and engaging in the systems. But play Doom 2016, play any other shooter. But we're trying to do something special here, and it's an unfortunate casualty of war, I guess, but we are in war for game design here.
I suppose I have one final question for you, and it's more just about going back to your content again. Where do you see it going in the future, or where do you see what you're going to work on in the future going?
So, going into the future, I'm not really sure. That's why it was important for me to define myself not as a Doom channel right from the start, because I want to do more things. And I'm not going to be talking about a lot of Doom Eternal strategy in 2 years. It's just not going to be happening. And I want to talk about other games that I think are interesting. I want to talk about movies. I want to have podcasts going, talking to interesting people. And, as my Doom content goes down, I mean, so will my traffic, and that's that's fine. I never set out to be a big YouTube star. I just kind of happened to have success out of nowhere, and so I feel like my channel will probably settle into kind of a niche thing with a dedicated audience, and the occasional video that does very well. And with that, I think I'd be pretty happy. But I definitely see myself being a channel that people come to when the next Doom game comes out, or if they do a reboot of Quake or something like that, or there's something else for me to fall in love with. I think people will be there for my channel in the future. And who knows what I might be talking about. Maybe I fall back in love with Mortal Kombat 4 years from now, and I become a big Mortal Kombat strategy channel. I mean, anything could happen. It's just whatever I'm inspired to do, I'll do it. I don't want to force myself to make content just to retain certain viewers. I'm going to talk about what I think is cool, and then I'll just go from there.
Perfect. Under the Mayo, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me today.